Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving deep into Chinua Achebe's absolute masterpiece, Things Fall Apart. We're going to break down its incredibly complex cultural, historical, and narrative layers. Basically, we'll be looking at how Achebe brilliantly uses one single, tragic life to map the brutal collision of two vastly different worlds.
So let's jump right into this iconic book. Published in 1958, literally right on the eve of Nigerian independence, Things Fall Apart acts as this powerful, absolutely necessary counter-narrative to earlier colonial histories. For decades, outsider writers kind of just painted Africa as this primitive, static, or even savage place. But Achebe, he set out to prove his African past was nothing of the sort. He invites us into a rich, totally dynamic society, showing us a world with its own profound history, long before a single European ever showed up.
You know, Achebe actually grabs his title straight from the poet W.B. Yeats. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. These words perfectly set up the overarching theme of our explainer today, which is this sense of an inevitable, tragic collapse. It heavily foreshadows a world where the center, that cultural glue holding a community together, just gets completely ripped apart by internal fractures and massive external pressures. Which brings us to the core question we're unpacking today, as we trace the tragic arc of our protagonist and his vibrant community. What exactly happens when the deeply rooted, unstoppable traditions of an African clan are suddenly slammed up against the bureaucratic and religious machinery of the British Empire?
To understand this collision, let's start with Act 1, the rise of Okonkwo.
Let's look at the incredibly driven, deeply flawed hero at the center of our story. Okonkwo's entire identity is basically built on a brutal, absolute rejection of his father, Unoka. See, Unoka was a guy who loved music, conversation, gentleness, but he was also deeply in debt and couldn't provide for his family. In their society, people mockingly called him an Agbala, a word meaning a woman or a man who had taken no title. Terrified of being seen as weak like his dad, Okonkwo builds his entire life on being fierce, relentless, and totally unyielding.
Driven by that haunting fear of failure, Okonkwo becomes the ultimate self-made man, literally fighting his way to the top. At just 18, he brings immense honor to his village by throwing Ameline's the cat, a legendary wrestler who'd been unbeaten for 7 straight years. Okonkwo grinds tirelessly to become a wealthy farmer with barns packed full of yams, which are considered the absolute king of crops. He provides for 3 wives, earns a terrifying reputation in war, and rises to become one of the most revered men in the Umofia clan. He is the literal picture of traditional masculine success.
But Okonkwo's story doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? Which brings us to Act 2, the world of Umuofia.
This takes place within the incredibly rich, self-sufficient Igbo society of Umuofia. A really crucial point here is understanding the Igbo concept of chi. A person's chi is their personal god or destiny. But here's the fascinating part. Destiny isn't just some fixed script you're forced to follow. It's something you actively wrestle with. The Igbo have a proverb that when a man says yes very strongly, his chi says yes also. So Okonkwo's immense success, that's a huge testament to his ambition. He actively negotiates with his destiny through sheer willpower.
And this perfectly illustrates a culture deeply rooted in eloquence. Far from those voiceless caricatures you see in old colonial textbooks, Umuofia is a place where language, storytelling, and negotiation are highly prized. Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. This means communication isn't just talking, it's a literal art form, absolutely essential for everything from resolving disputes to teaching the next generation.
So rather than some primitive, static society, Umuofia is a dynamic, super complex world supported by deep pillars of community. They have highly structured agricultural cycles like the Feast of the New Yam. They maintain social harmony through the Week of Peace. And justice? It isn't random. It's served by the Egwugu, masked ancestral spirits who mediate disputes with profound wisdom. It's a society fully bound together by a shared devotion to the earth goddess Ani, ensuring a tight balance between individual ambition and communal survival.
All right, let's move to the turning point of our explainer, Act 3, the colonial intrusion. Here's the tragic irony of Okonkwo's life. Right at the very height of his power, his gun accidentally explodes at a funeral, killing a boy. For this crime against the earth, he's exiled for 7 years. And while Okonkwo is away, the British presence slowly and insidiously escalates. It starts off innocently enough, just some strange new missionaries. But soon, they establish a church, offering refuge to the clan's outcasts. Before the clan can even fully process the shift, the British had built a courthouse and just dropped their own government right on top of them.
You can clearly see the stark contrast between these two worlds. Umuofia's deeply integrated communal justice is suddenly shoved aside by the cold, uncomprehending nature of the new British courts. The district commissioner judges cases in total ignorance of local customs. It's a complete imposition of one rigid, highly bureaucratic foreign structure onto an intricate, deeply flexible traditional society.
Okonkwo's wise friend, Obiarika, perfectly captures the devastation here. He realizes the British didn't just conquer them with superior weapons, they fractured their unity. By converting their own brothers and sons to a new religion and a new government, the British effectively put a knife to the very cultural ties that held Umuofia together. The center, just like Yeats warned, is no longer holding.
And this brings us to Act 4, a tragic fall. Let's look at the collision that concludes Okonkwo's personal journey. After 7 long years, his exile finally ends. He comes back expecting this grand hero's welcome, fully expecting to rally the great warriors of Umuofia to drive out the colonizers and reclaim their glory. But instead, he discovers a society that has completely lost its unified will to fight. The clan has been softened, divided from the inside out.
And the absolute ultimate blow? It comes from inside his own compound. His eldest son, Nwoye, who was deeply traumatized by his father's harshness and the rigidities of their culture, is actually converted to Christianity. For Okonkwo, a man who bases his entire existence on strict patriarchal tradition and venerating his ancestors, his own son's defection is an unimaginable, totally unforgivable betrayal.
Tensions finally reach a boiling point when the British violently disrupt a clan meeting. Okonkwo's rigid, unbending interpretation of masculinity leaves him with only one possible response. He can't adapt, he won't negotiate. So, in a fated, impulsive act of violent resistance, Okonkwo draws his machete and strikes down a British messenger.
He looks around, waiting for the men of Umuofia to join him in revolt. But they let the other messengers escape. Okonkwo realizes instantly that his people will not fight. And just look at how this builds to a devastating irony. The man who spent his entire life terrified of dying in disgrace like his father walks away and takes his own life. Suicide is the ultimate abomination against the earth goddess. Because of this, his own clansmen can't even touch his body to give him an honorable burial. He dies entirely alone.
But Achebe's masterful explainer of colonialism doesn't actually end with Okonkwo's tragic death. It ends with Act 5. Whose history is it?
This brings a truly chilling shift in perspective. The narrative suddenly zooms out, right at the end. We're pulled out of the intimate, deeply emotional tragedy of the Igbo people and dropped directly into the cold, distant mind of the British district commissioner. Think about it. We spent an entire story witnessing Okonkwo's epic reality, his triumphs, his fears, his profound cultural roots. But to the commissioner, Okonkwo is just an anonymous native, a minor inconvenience to be swiftly documented, judged, and forgotten. The commissioner literally stands over Okonkwo's dangling body, completely unmoved. Instead, he's just brainstorming. He decides this little incident will make a nice, interesting detail in the book he's writing about his experiences in Africa. And the title he plans to give this book? The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger. I mean, it's an incredibly arrogant, horrific title that completely wipes away all the cultural complexity we've just witnessed.
The commissioner thinks to himself, maybe Okonkwo's story is worth the whole chapter. But no. He decides he must be firm in cutting out extra details. It's going to be reduced to a single, reasonable paragraph. And the true tragedy Achebe highlights right here is the violence of the pen. It's the literal erasure of history. He shows us exactly how colonial powers take these rich, vibrant, beautifully flawed indigenous lives and just flatten them into mere footnotes in a European textbook.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you staring at this final, highly provocative question. Who gets to write the final chapter of history? Achebe gave Okonkwo a whole novel, beautifully saving him from becoming just a paragraph in the commissioner's book. But man, it really makes you wonder, how many other epic, complex human stories have been lost, simplified, or pacified by those holding the pen? Think about that, and keep questioning the histories you read. Thanks so much for learning with me today.